Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University, and today we are going to be talking about the Truman Scholarship, as well as a few other fellowships that are for people who are interested in public service. Joining me today is Armando Montero, who is one of our more recent Truman Scholarship winners and a current L1 first-year law school student at the San Diego County School of Law. So good. Just to give you some context, some of you might be familiar with my office, the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, or just learning about that term, national scholarships. But what we mean by that are any sort of external major award. So these awards would be offered by agencies or organizations or nonprofit groups or philanthropic groups outside of ASU. So all the awards that we work with are non-ASU awards. And therefore, if you're looking just for money to pay for tuition or just a little help, we're not really the right office for that. That's scholarships and financial aid. Because these are nationwide pools, these are obviously very competitive, right? We're dealing with applicant pools in the thousands as opposed to maybe just a few dozen or a few hundred. They are offered at all levels, people that are currently enrolled, people that are recently graduated, graduate students, professional students. Our office actually exists to help all students at ASU, all campuses, all levels, right? So our caseload grows every fall quite a bit. But the important thing to know is because they are highly competitive, they are highly valuable. And that value oftentimes is more than just the dollar amount associated with them, right? These are all merit-based, and they demonstrate to the world that you have risen to a certain level of achievement, that some organization finds you worthy of support, and that's really helpful in getting on to the next stage of life. They exist for a wide range of reasons, right? So a lot of times people come in, they say, hey, this is my major, what fellowships are available? What I am more interested in is, what is your objective? What is your purpose? And so they can exist to support research or training, particularly critical language training, or if you want to go do research on a specific topic. A lot of them support international experiences, right? They support study abroad. They will fund you for a year abroad after graduation. They'll put you in an immersive language training program. Yes, all of the awards that we work with do have a monetary component. I don't think there's any one of them that doesn't. So a lot of these awards can help fund your long-term educational plans. Truman is one of those, of course. And I think all fellowships that are in this category, and I typically use the word fellowship in place of national scholarship because one word's always better than two, will support your leadership and professional development. All of the awards that we work with are mission driven, meaning that somebody created them to achieve a particular goal. And in the case of Truman, that is to promote, identify, promote, and encourage people that want to pursue impactful careers in public service and government. So if you haven't been there already, I assume you have if you've registered for this event, but our website has a wealth of resources on it, including a scholarship database that you can use to search for other opportunities. When you're ready to start booking appointments, you can do so. If you're not on our weekly bulletin yet, you can subscribe there. So what do we do, right? A lot of times people say, oh, that's great. Thanks for the info. And then we don't see them again. In reality, these kinds of info sessions and webinars are just the tip of the iceberg. We spend a ton of our time providing individual counseling, working with students as they work on their applications, providing writing instruction. If you have an interview, we will put you through lengthy and painful practice interviews. And we also manage campus committees. If you need to be nominated, as you do for Truman, we're going to work to manage those faculty committees, but also work with your faculty to make sure that they are supporting you as best as possible. So a really comprehensive support for students as they're applying for major awards, and we've done pretty well. It's not bragging if it's true, right? Pound for pound, ASU compared to our peer institutions does exceptionally well. In terms of Truman Scholars, we've had 4 in the past 10 years, which if you consider there's really only 1 chosen per state per year, that's pretty good. We've done really well in terms of Fulbright, and just know that you're in good hands. The university has stepped up to provide resources to support you. So we're mainly going to be focused on Truman today. And so that's why Armando's here, is to talk a little bit about his experience as an applicant and also as a Truman Scholar who's been in and has gotten to benefit from some of the resources. In thing to know that this is a .gov, right? This is a federal program. So that's why one of the criteria are that you be a U.S. citizen, right? And so it is a merit scholarship. Need is not a component of the Truman Scholarship, but they are looking specifically for juniors who want to pursue careers in government, public service, or advocacy, right? They are primarily looking for leadership potential and commitment to public service. And in return, you get, of course, funding for your graduate study, but also access to mentoring, high-level internships, and sort of lifelong ongoing support. Some famous scholars, Truman scholars, former mayor of Phoenix and current representative Greg Stanton actually was a Truman scholar. I can never get him to show up for one of these info sessions. You know, I try all the time. Andy Kim is a great example. Stacey Abrams, if you've been seeing her on the news, right, the amount of work that she does to get the vote out, a great example of a Truman scholar. Susan Rice, former national security advisor, Neil Gorsuch, Supreme Court justice, right? So these are kind of some high-level examples, very, very prominent examples of Truman scholars. But you know, they can go into a lot of other fields. You know, we can go into academia, we can go into public education, we can go into other fields. But these are some of the better-known ones. In terms of our most recent Truman scholars, as you can see, they've come from a wide range of fields. Devin, let's see, 2008, and I think he's still Deputy Attorney General of California, so he's kind of leveled up. Danielle Back's an interesting example, even though, as we'll discuss, medical degrees are not a high priority for Truman. You know, she was really committed to public service. You know, Leah Lubin is more of an academically focused Truman scholar, right? So she's working in a think tank that studies crime distribution in Chicago. Frank, another former Truman scholar, totally impossible to book for this because he actually works in Kamala Harris's office. He is her one of her main policy advisors. He's a wee bit busy of late, so he hasn't been able to answer my emails. Our other two more recent scholars include Alexa, who was at the time she became a Truman scholar, was on the city council of Prescott at age 21. And Judith Nanta Sanchez, who's actually still enrolled at ASU because she was just selected this past year, right? But here today is Armando. So Armando, as an introduction, tell us a little bit about what your interests were leading into Truman, what you're doing now, and kind of how that decision to apply happened, and just kind of like where you were as an undergrad, where these folks are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi everyone, and thank you, Dr. Mox, for the invitation to come and join. I always love coming to these information sessions and getting to talk with all of you. So my name's Armando Montero. I was selected as a Truman Scholar in 2022. And just a little bit of brief background. So I, first got involved in politics and public service my sophomore year of high school. Just first volunteering on some local campaigns, school board, city council, state legislative races, mostly getting involved around the issue of mental health and social emotional well-being. And through those experiences, that's what drove me once I graduated from the district in high school to run for the school board. So my freshman and sophomore year at ASU, I was running for the Tempe Union High School District Governing Board. I got elected at 19 years old during my sophomore year. And during the campaign is when I first became aware of the Truman Scholarship. So I know Dr. Mox, your office had reached out and said, hey, we think this would be a perfect fit given some of the just initial interest in public service. And so, through that process, I know that was about a year early. And so there was a bit of leeway and headway into really being able to understand kind of what the process of Truman involved and kind of what really having some time to think about not just like what my previous experiences around public service are, but I think one of the big things that Truman cares about is where you want to go. Besides the actual money that you get from the scholarship, I found the most valuable part of the scholarship was the connections that you get from that, the professional development that the foundation puts you through when you're your first summer after selection, and then all the programs that they have after that. So I've had the opportunity to participate in their Democracies Fellow program, which is specific to those that are interested in running for office. I also had the opportunity to do their Summer Leadership Institute. And so I spent a summer after graduation in DC with pretty much majority of my class that was selected that year, interning with the American Council on Education. But a lot of the professional development that they give you was very informative for me in kind of making a decision about graduate school. What are the options that are out there? And that's really what drove me to take a year off after graduation. So I spent that year working for ASU in their Educational Outreach and Student Services Department, getting some experience there. But I think the foundation spent a lot of time really delving into, this is kind of what maybe some of the traditional thoughts that we have around graduate school. There are a lot of other options out there. And I think the vast network of Trumans that are all across the nation, and any possible interest that you have, there's probably a Truman that they can connect you with that has experience in that field and can give you some advice and some mentorship. And so it's, I think the relationships that I built, even with my class, I know these are going to be lifelong friends that I still keep in contact with now and go back to DC every once in a while still to visit. But also the older Trumans who have such a plethora of experience has been a fantastic opportunity. And so, that was, briefly, my experience. Happy to answer, Dr. Mox. I don't know if there's anything you want me to touch on application specific, or also happy to answer any questions while I'm here.
Yeah, we'll get into some more specific things. And, I forgot to mention at the outset, if you have questions as we're moving through, feel free to pop them in a chat. I'm going to save some time for Q&A before we have to let Armando go. He's currently at a conference and needs to step out, but plenty of time for Q&A. So, as Armando pointed out, chief among the benefits is, money for graduate or professional studies. So typically law school. That money sits till whenever you need it. It does not have to be used right away. I actually just had coffee with Alexa, who was even further back than Armando, and she's still deciding, if she's going to use these funds or not. And some Truman scholars, George Stephanopoulos actually was a famous example, never actually used a stipend, right? But the majority of people do, right? Because $30,000 for grad school is certainly a nice benefit. Many Truman scholars also have preferred admission to many partner schools. There are many schools that are looking for Truman scholars and prioritize them in the admissions process. So quickly, Jessica, no, it's for a wide range of degrees, and we'll talk about that. It doesn't have to be for law school. Truman Scholarship Leadership Week in Liberty, Missouri at William Jewell College. What was your memory of Truman Leadership Week, Armando?
Yeah, it was a lot. They threw a lot at you. But it was a fantastic opportunity. Like I said, I think traditionally when I had gone into this, I thought it was going to be some, you're going to an experience for a whole week with people that are, have long resumes, that are very talented. And so I had the initial like, hey, this is probably going to be something that's really competitive. It wasn't. Everybody is there and has their own passions, but I think are all there for similar reasons. And I think the knowledge that I gained from everybody having such a unique passion and just the nature of the application, most people will have a specific passion or specific interest for their public service. And so just to be able to learn about all the different experiences that people have had and where they want to go was one of my favorite parts of that week. Like I mentioned earlier, they do a week-long professional development around all kinds of things from, career choices to graduate school. They pair you with a specific mentor. Older Trumans that have gone through this experience, they make you do policy presentations on something. They put you in groups of about 10 people and have you do a presentation or a policy proposal on a specific issue, which again, just having that experience to work with people from different states, different interests is a really, really good experience.
Yeah, I refer to it as Truman boot camp, right? Or public service boot camp, right? It's you'll come out the other side a little different than you went in. So as Armando mentioned, one of the benefits as well is all Truman scholars are offered an opportunity to participate in the Washington Summer Institutes, which means that they will work to help place you in an internship related to your goal in Washington, D.C., and then provide access to housing. It's not mandatory, but as Armando pointed out, the majority of people do it because it's a wonderful opportunity. And then if people decide to defer admission into graduate school, there's additional internship opportunities available, other sort of professional development things. And the Truman people just stay in touch with the Truman scholars long term, right? They're constantly checking in. You're submitting annual reports. They're making sure that you have the support you need. As I mentioned, grad school partners, these are schools that actually offer additional funds if you choose them as a Truman Scholar. Arizona State on this list actually provides a full tuition waiver to any Truman Scholar who selects ASU for graduate or law school. So that's a nice bonus, and a lot of these schools do. Because honestly, $30,000 towards a law degree at Georgetown or Harvard, not going to get you that far. So that's nice that they provide that additional benefit. So in terms of criteria, this is in order to be able to apply. You need to be a full-time student who is in their junior year. Junior year is defined as having some study remaining after this next summer. So you could be graduating in December 2025, May 26, or thereafter, but not beyond August 2026. So having about a semester or 2 semesters remaining after this school year. You have to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to be planning to pursue graduate study. Now, in terms of what they're looking for, you'll notice this list. There's no minimum GPA. There is a minimum. Actually, no, they got rid of the minimum GPA. They got rid of that several years ago. But public service record, leadership record, graduate study proposal, policy proposal, your overall quality of presentation or writing in your academic record. And I can tell you, I've been on the National Review Committee a couple times. It's fun. It's exciting. You get to meet some really cool people. But really, those first two things are where it's at, right? They really want to see evidence that you have already started your mission. You've already gotten involved in the things that matter to you, and that you've gone out there and stepped out there and put yourself out there as a leader. So, and they have questions that ask pretty pointed questions about these criteria. So, Armando, can you think back through, or maybe you've traumatized it out and can't remember, but can you think about what your approach was in terms of how you articulated your leadership and commitment to service in the application?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was being able to always tie every answer that you give. Obviously, there'll be very pointed questions about like, what is your favorite? I think the questions are like, what was your favorite public service activity or most rewarding public service activity? They obviously have the questions more forward thinking about what graduate program do you want to go into and why is that related to public service? It's not binding in any way, but it really makes you think about, and this was one of the things that Dr. Mox and I had really worked closely on when I initially had said, hey, I want to do like the joint program that ASU offers for a JD and one of the doctorate programs. And he really pushed me on, okay, well, why both? And I think, it helps me think about, okay, how is a JD, for example, really going to serve why I want to go into public service and where I see myself in 5 to 10 years? Because those were the hardest questions for me. Is like, I have a passion for public service. I know I want to be in public service, but where I see myself in 10 years, who knows? And so I think to really critically think about and have valid reasons as to where you want to be and why, I think for me, it's tying back to my why. So tying back into, why I got involved in public service in the first place, why I stick in public service. One of the running jokes, one of the first things they say when we got to the summer leadership in Truman was like, congratulations, you're all going to be broke for the rest of your lives. Because public service doesn't pay very well. So we all have a burning passion to make change and do good. And so I think Truman is very inclined to look at people that have not just talked about issues, but have actually taken action to make a positive change. And so any way that you can demonstrate in your application that you're not someone that's just passionate about a certain issue, but, leading up to this point in your academic career, you've taken steps to actually attempt to make change or to make change. And they want to see that this scholarship will kind of be a catalyst to be able to give you the platform to continue that work. So I think those were kind of the most helpful points for me and really helping shape my application, not just in individual questions, but really trying to make a coherent story about my public service history and where I want to be. So it should read as kind of one coherent story about my public service journey.
Yeah, really well put. Thank you. And I, as I was listening to that, and if I was sitting in your shoes, what I would get out of that is, wow, what a wonderful opportunity. I need to start getting my life in order as it is. I'm entering junior year, right? Now is the time I really should be thinking about these things. So, this scholarship application is actually a really wonderful exercise, win, lose, or draw, in doing that work, right? Which is hard work, and you don't get a grade for it and you don't get paid for it, but it's essential to becoming the sort of person you want to be, right? One of the parts of the application is actually a policy proposal too. And so you have an opportunity to actually practice policy making in the context of the application, which is great. in terms of, there was questions before about what types of degrees is this for. Law school is a very popular choice. People that work in policy, having training in the law is helpful, but Master of Public Policy, Master of Public Affairs, Master of International Affairs, Master of Public Health are all really common options as well. People going on into education, urban planning, economics, sustainability, conservation, anything that will lead to a career in the public sector, which is to say the not private or the not for-profit sector. So that can include, education, it can include government service, but a lot of other things. Very difficult to sell a medical degree, very difficult to sell an MBA, right? Because Master of Business Administration tends to indicate that you want to work in the private sector. MD is tough, but if you can convince, the readers that this is going to lead to a public service oriented career, it can be done, right? I've had a couple of applicants do that. So obviously, government involvement, as any, from the previous slides that you saw, most of those people were going into government agencies. Elected office, of course, is a great pathway. Every year I get the email when we come up on the general elections, I'm waiting for it, is when they tell us how many Truman scholars are standing for office nationwide, and then finding out how many Truman scholars are actually in the House, how many Truman scholars were elected to state office and things like that. It's cool. It's a cool number to see. But you can be working for non-governmental organizations. You can be working for local nonprofits. Working in education, even private schools. It's still the public sector. Non-governmental research, and the way they talk about it is if your website ends in .org, .gov, .mil, or .edu, it's probably fine, right? So Jessica asked, does a PhD in clinical psychology count as an MPH? No, an MPH is a Master of Public Health. That's a different degree, right? So a PhD in clinical psychology would be a research degree, yeah. Which could, depending on where you want to go as a clinical psychiatrist or psychologist, could work, right? If you wanted to enter private practice and live in Beverly Hills and make a lot of money, no. If you wanted to work with troubled youth as they work through, issues with mental health, absolutely, right? It really depends on what your goal is. So to get started in the process, first, you will want to take a look at the Truman Scholarship website itself. I will also be sure to, you want to go to our website under the Apply tab. Will be specific instructions on the ASU process. We will share that information in our follow-up email to you all, but you can find it yourself pretty easily. Your first step really is to take a look at this information, send me your resume and your transcripts, and then if I give you the green light, we'll go ahead and schedule an appointment. That first step is really so you and I both don't burn 30 minutes of our lives, right? That maybe Truman's just not the right fit for what you're trying to do, or maybe you don't have the background that would mark you as a potential Truman candidate. So if it seems like there's enough material here to talk about, or if this seems like an appropriate pathway based on what I can see, I'll invite you in for an intake appointment, and you and I will walk through the application. We'll develop strategies for how to actually address some of these questions and make sure you're ready to get off to a good start. So the process itself, once you get started, you'll be drafting these essays. This is a long and iterative process, right? If you got started tomorrow, you might be able to get through who knows how many drafts. I can promise you it'll never be enough. How many drafts of the leadership essays and the public service essay do you think you went through, Armando?
Probably 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah, and they're never really finished. They're just submitted, right? We just kind of keep going through them. You'll also need to secure letters of recommendation, and we'll talk more about that requirement in a moment. You will submit your complete application by November 25th. And so close to the end of the term, you will submit your complete application, and then our committees will review those applications that we've received and then potentially invite you to interview for nomination. Letters of recommendation. Truman's a little different than a lot of scholarships out there in that they designate topics for the letters, right? And so one of the letters, they ask that it focuses on your leadership abilities and potential. And a second letter, they ask to focus on your commitment to career and public service. And then a third letter focusing on basically academic potential. So Armando, what was your strategy for this? I mean, because this is kind of a weird approach that most places just ask for general letters. What was your strategy as you were thinking through which of the, how to figure out who to ask for these?
Yeah, so for me, because each of these is tied to a specific question that they ask you in the application. And so whatever my answer was for those three questions, I always thought, well, who was it that I worked with closely or could speak to what I had written for those answers? So for the most satisfying public service experience, I had wrote about the colleague that I worked for on the specific project that I was working on. I know, the intellect and prospects for continuing academic success. I had asked a professor that I had, who I had worked very closely, did an honors contract for Barrett with, and had a really good relationship with, knowing it was going to be somebody that wasn't just going to write kind of a form letter of recommendation, but can actually speak to, some of the more intricate details. I think that's one of the things that they continue to mention even after the application and receiving the scholarship, was talking about these letters of recommendations. I think are critical to really speak to and give more detail to the answers that you're able to give in your application, because they give you a pretty strict word limit on some of these answers. Like you cannot say a lot of things. That's, I think, the toughest part for me was, the word count is very short. And so use the letters of recommendation as an opportunity to expand on that and be forward with that, with who you're asking and saying, hey, this is the requirement, the specific letter that I'm, asking your assistance on. Here's the answer I gave. Can you speak to this specifically? And usually they're very open to that. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, and in our meetings, we'll talk more strategy about whom to ask. But as you're thinking about it now, all three of these letters do not need to be faculty members. And in fact, the faculty members might not be the best people to write about your leadership potential or your commitment to a career in public service. Probably should get a faculty member to talk about your academic abilities. But so it could be community leaders, people who have supervised you in work or volunteer experiences. So think broadly. But like I said, we'll strategize about that in our one-on-one meetings. We are allowed to nominate up to 4 students per year. Right. So that's why we have the campus committee process, and the whole nomination process is, we would love to nominate more than that, but we can nominate up to 4 students per year. We're actually allowed 2 bonus slots, so technically up to 6 students per year if those students are transfer students. So if you transferred into ASU, you could occupy one of those bonus slots. And they did this, and I think it's wonderful. They started doing this a few years ago because they recognize that if you're a transfer student, you maybe haven't had as much time to establish yourself, establish connections on your campus, make connections with faculty members. And, a lot of our really amazing leaders are non-traditional students who are coming from, non-traditional pathways. And that's really opened up the diversity of the cohort. And I think it's a wonderful addition. So after that, if you're nominated, we'll get ready to submit for February 4, and final revisions, polishing your essays, all that kind of stuff. So it is done state by state. So they will review all of the Arizona applicants, meaning people that claim Arizona as their home state. And then if you are selected as one of the finalists for that region, you will be invited to interview. They're actually hosted on our campus, so no travel, unfortunately. You can just walk over to the U Club, and they will choose at least 1 scholar per state, and they have 15 at-large candidates. So some states, some years might get more than 1. So there was 2 selected year before last. Great. You must attend Truman Leadership Week, and you are encouraged to participate in those institutes, and there are a lot of other opportunities as well. So we'll pause right here because, like I said, Armando's got to get back to his conference, but I think great time for Q&A about Truman. First couple in there, any flexibility on the full-time enrollment? No, there is not. You have to be enrolled full-time at the time of application. And that's just a Truman rule. And a lot of their rules are written into the statute that established the foundation, and so they're non-negotiable. It would take an act of Congress to change that, unfortunately. But yeah, transfer students still do have to be juniors with regard to time left until graduation. So that's really what that's about. Online student status has no bearing, as ASU considers all of our students, so it doesn't differentiate whether you're a digital immersion or a campus immersion student at all. So good questions. Any other questions, particularly for Armando, about application strategies or the experience itself, or anything else you're wondering before we change topics a bit? That means you did a wonderful job, Armando. Yeah, there's a great question. Was it a difficult process? That's a great question.
Uh, I'll be honest, yes, it was. I think for me, beyond even the application stage, the interview stage is a whole different beast. I remember going through hours of practice interviews with Dr. Mox and various other people around the Arizona community, where they really try to prepare you. The Truman interview is notorious for being difficult. They want to see how you think on your feet. They challenge you. I don't think in many ways is not a normal interview, but like a job interview at all. And these are all people that are, very, in some instances, very high level officials. I know in my committee, I had Chris Mays, who's now our attorney general, Judge Snow from the District Court of Arizona. I'm blanking on a few. There was, I think, a couple attorneys on there. I'm blanking who else was on there, but these are all people that, especially for those in Arizona, are very knowledgeable about Arizona. So if you're writing about a state level issue, know what you're talking about, because half of my interview was being asked about my policy proposal because it was specific to education in Arizona. And so I think you have a great opportunity with Dr. Mox and the office to give you those resources, which we are very fortunate to have. And so take advantage of that. Start early so you can go through multiple drafts, talk to friends, professors, family, just get as much feedback as you can to make your application as strong as possible.
Yeah, great advice. Zachariah asked a really great question. How much would you say your essay evolved throughout the writing process?
I would definitely say quite a bit. It was similar, but I would say very different from where I initially had started. Like I said, I think the biggest piece is just the word limit that you have. And so as you kind of go through different iterations of it, you're going to find what's most important to pull out of those answers and what's going to be important for the committee to understand. And like I said, you have people that have gone through this process or have sat on the committee. So as you know, I'll put my email in the chat after this. So I'm always happy to answer any questions about the process or whatnot specific to that. I worked pretty closely with our most recent winner last year throughout that process as she was going through it. And so always happy to help out on, as you're going through and have specific questions to answer them.
Jessica asked, how long the interview? Do they set a limit? Yeah, absolutely. I think your interview was probably like the fastest 20 minutes of your life.
It is. Yes. You spend hours preparing. And I remember, being so nervous because it's about a month of preparation for the interview. And then and I had it virtual. It's still during COVID and they're back in person now, but I remember just closing my laptop after 20 minutes, but like, that was it, really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's rapid fire. I mean, they don't waste any time. Question after question after question, and they will cut you off and they will redirect you. And so I just be prepared to, stand your ground. And if you don't know something, say that.
Yeah. Room full of lawyers, As I mentioned, I was just having coffee with Alexa Shull, who is our winner from 2017, 18. And she said that every interview that she's done since then has seemed comically easy. Right. And by comparison, it's such wonderful training. And every candidate who's even gone through the finalist preparation, every interview they've done since then has been easy. And so that's another benefit, right? And we do truly believe that the process is the outcome, right? That that's the virtue of going through these things, is not necessarily whether or not you win the scholarship. That's certainly, a bonus, but there's a lot of factors we can't control, right? There's been so many years I've looked at the winner, looked at our applicants and said, I can't believe so-and-so didn't win. They were such a great student. And then I read the bios of the winners that year and I say, oh, yeah, that's a pretty amazing young person right there, And so that's not what you can control. We control what we can control, right? So we've been very good about getting finalists. We've had, I think, 3 out of, 3 finalists a year for the past 3 years in a row, I think, like that. And so, yeah, I put the page that contains the ASU specific instructions in the chat. And so that's what you'll want to refer to as, to reiterate what I've talked about. Armando's put his email address in there. And like I said, he would welcome any questions that you have. He's been a wonderful resource, and he's benefited from the resources of our previous applicants as well. And, we've got a really supportive community here at ASU. So Armando, thank you. I appreciate it. We'll let you get back to work.
Thank you. And good luck to everybody. Feel free to reach out. Bye.
Great. Bye. So with our remaining time here, I'd like to talk about some other awards, right? So one of our other big philosophies in ONSA is that, you know, you can't apply for just one, right? And so many of our students who apply for one award end up applying for multiple awards because one, you start to build up that skill set, right? You get good at talking about yourself. You get good at applying for things, and your mission gets clear, your purpose gets clear, and then you start to see that these awards actually do interrelate and support one another. And so, just to talk through a few examples. The Boren Scholarship is a Department of Defense funded program, right? This is part of the National Security Education Program, but this is a really great option for people that want to get into the intelligence community, people that want to work for the Department of State, anything related to national security or international relations. And essentially, what it'll do, it'll fund up to provide up, $25,000 to fund what they prefer is 26 weeks or 6 months of critical foreign language studies. So anything non-Western European around the world. So you would actually go here. Maria spent 6 months, or would have spent. Yeah, she did spend 6 months. This is pre-COVID, right before COVID, in Jordan studying Arabic, right? Because she was really interested in refugee resettlement issues and wanted to build that skill set. We have information coming up on this and the critical languages scholarship as well. This is a summer program. It's still travel abroad, but you would spend 8 to 10 weeks in the summer with a group of other scholars at a language training center. There's 14 languages to choose from, which is different than Boren, where you can choose any language you like, where they have a menu of options. Boren does expect that you work for at least a year in the federal government in return for the fellowship, which for the right candidate, it's not a problem because they'll actually give you non-compete hiring status, just the same as you do for our military veterans, and they'll help you with job placement and resume review. Yeah, it's for foreign studies. So it's a great question in case anyone didn't see it. Michelle asked, would it allow for the study of Navajo language? It would not, because unless you were able to do it outside of the US, right? It's a great question, and people have asked before. There are awards every year for people that want to study other indigenous languages, perhaps in Mexico or Central America. But yeah, it has to be outside of the US. That's what the requirement. The James C. Gaither Junior Fellowship. It's a lengthy name, but just know this. It is a junior fellowship at the Carnegie Endowment for World Peace. So if you're really more in the think tank kind of trajectory, you like working with the theory, you like working with policy and white papers and things like that, essentially you get a paid position as a junior researcher at the Carnegie Endowment. This is another one that we have to nominate for. We can nominate 2 students per year for it. Great program. I've had a lot of students get into this. PPI Junior Summer Institute. So PPIA stands for the Public Policy and International Affairs Program. So if you're looking in either of those areas, particularly if you're looking at MPPs, MPAs, or MIAs, that's Master of Public Policy and Public Affairs, International Affairs. It's a summer program that basically is like Truman Leadership Week, but bigger, right? And so it's intended to help you prepare to be a great applicant for one of these graduate programs. So not only is the program fully funded, they'll also provide you a $5,000 scholarship if you decide to apply to one of those PPIA schools. And that includes Carnegie Mellon, Princeton, Berkeley, Michigan, Minnesota, and Washington. All really good public affairs schools. And again, that's juniors as well. So we see a lot of our Truman applicants also apply for PPIA. So, Sammy, for instance, was a Truman finalist. He didn't get the Truman, but he did get PPIA and spent the following summer in that program. If your public service interest has to do with conservation or sustainability, you might want to also look at the Udall Undergraduate Scholarship. This is another .gov, and it's actually named in honor of Arizona native Morris K. Udall and Stuart Udall. Stuart was the Secretary of Interior under Kennedy, and Mo was our representative for 25 plus years back in the 60s and 70s. It is another nomination required award, but it would basically provide, again, leadership development and up to $7,000 for sophomores or juniors who are looking for careers related to sustainability. It also provides awards to Native American or Native Alaskan students who want to work in tribal public policy or tribal health. So going back to our Navajo language question, no, not necessarily, but if you were a registered member of a Native American or Native Alaskan tribe who wanted to work in policy or healthcare, you'd be a really strong candidate. Like I said, there's a four-day leadership development orientation that they have, and $7,000 for your academic expenses, sophomores and juniors. And for those of you who are thinking about Department of State Foreign Service careers, there are these 3 fellowships that are actually identical. They have the exact same application, but they have 3 different funding sources and names. But the Pickering Fellowship, Rangel Fellowship, and Payne Fellowship, they're very generous, right? And so they're going to provide probably as much funding as you will need to get a master's degree that will lead to a career in the Foreign Service. That particular master's degree is up to you as long as it clearly leads towards a career in public service. They will also get you an internship at Department of State in DC. And then after your first year of master's study, you can do an internship at an embassy abroad. The really cool thing about it is you can skip the Foreign Service Officer test, which if you know anything about it, is not fun. And you're guaranteed employment in the US Foreign Service, which is great. So you can imagine that if you think back through some of the other awards we've talked about, you can see somebody winning a critical languages scholarship or a Boren scholarship and then going on, get a Truman and then winning a Pickering, right? It happens. Students stack these awards like that. A little more modest version of that, the Rangel also has a summer program very much like the PPIA. And this is open to sophomores, juniors, or seniors, but it is the same kind of thing. It's a 6-week summer program. They provide you actually a little living stipend, so you don't have to worry about not working over the summer. But this is great for people that are looking for international affairs preparation. I added this one, the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Program, CBYX, because Jordan Harb was actually a Truman finalist, did not get the Truman, right? But he went on to apply for a few other awards. One of them was this, where he had to spend a year abroad. The first part of the year was taking classes at a German university, taking German language courses. And then the second half of the year was working in an internship in Germany, right? And so he's back now, finishing his senior year. But it's a really cool opportunity, again, focused on ambassadorial work. Again, if you're thinking about international careers, it's a really good opportunity. Another good international focus program is the Killam Fellowship. This one's modest, pretty modest in its design. Really, you just spend a semester at a Canadian university. ASU hosts Canadian students here as part of the program as well. But the idea being that you are an exchange student, so you would pay ASU tuition, plus they provide you $6,000 in funding, and you get to spend the fall or spring semester at a Canadian university, ideally some university that does your thing very well. Cool program. We've done very well in that. Fulbright. I don't know how many of you heard of Fulbright, but we are in the thick of it right now. Our campus deadline is Tuesday. We have well over 100 applicants for this year. But this is a really good one to build up to because the soonest you can apply for it is your graduating year. You need to have a bachelor's degree in order to apply, or excuse me, in order to leave, to go. So we have graduating seniors, recent graduates, and graduate students working with us right now. But it's a fully funded year abroad. That's the simplest version of it. What do? You can do research projects, you can enroll in a graduate program, you can pursue artistic practice, or you can serve as an ETA or an English teaching assistant. So you are there in an English language classroom abroad to serve as a token American and provide lessons on American culture and things like that. Truman applicants, Truman finalists tend to be really good applicants for ETA because they're personable usually, they're good at working with people, and they really understand American civics, right? A leadership-focused scholarship is the Schwarzman Scholarship. This is a graduate fellowship. It would pay for a master's degree at Tsinghua University in Beijing, China. So this is a cool program of like, hey, why not spend a year in China? That's the best way I can explain it, because they're not necessarily looking for people who have made China the focus of their study, but they're looking for people who demonstrate great leadership skills and would benefit from considering how China affects their issues. And another great leadership-focused postgraduate scholarship is the Knight Hennessy Scholarship. So Nick was a great candidate for Truman, and he went on to apply and was a finalist for Knight Hennessy. He's reapplying now after having worked for a couple of years, but this will pay for full funding for any graduate program at Stanford University. And again, leadership is one of their primary characteristics. So that's what I'm chaining together here is if you have the characteristics to be a strong Truman candidate, you could be a strong candidate for many of these other awards. Like Nathaniel, who was a Truman finalist, did not get the award. He got the Udall scholarship, but then went on to win the Rhodes Scholarship, right? And kind of stitching together all that he had learned from those other programs. But this is probably one of the more famous postgrad fellowships out there. That, along with the Marshall Scholarship, both of those would fully fund 2 years of graduate study in the United Kingdom. So, cool program. So, quick tour. And again, if you want to dive more deeply into any of those opportunities that I talked about, I'm happy to do that. You can take a look, and all the links are in the scholarship database on our website. So yeah, again, if you want to get started with Truman, take a look at the Truman site, make sure that you're eligible, make sure it matches your goals. Shoot me your resume and transcripts, kyle.mox@asu.edu. And then we'll talk about scheduling an appointment and start opening an application. So great. Questions, concerns, worries, complaints, anything from you all at this time? Unofficial transcripts, yeah, that's fine. Yep, I don't need official transcripts. The resumes due when you email me. So if you want to talk about Truman, just send me a resume and your transcripts. Yep. So, a lot of people think a lot about, overthink that really. Just, I want to see what you've been up to. I want to see what activity, where you put your energies, where your activity has been, what kind of accomplishments you've had to this point. I'm not at this stage of the game. I'm not terribly worried about format or anything like that. I just need to know the information to know, does this make sense, right? Is this a good pathway for you to be on? And if not, what is a good pathway for you to be on? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. And as I said, we'll send a follow-up email as well, including a link to recording of this if you want to refer back to it later. But I hope to hear from you all. And if not for Truman, hopefully for one of these other programs. So have a great rest of your day.